technological innovation and building versus like help it, and which politicians, which kind of policies help technological innovation? Because that seems to be, if you look at human history, that's an important component of empires rising and succeeding.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in terms of dating civilization, the start of civilization, I think the start of writing, in my view, is that's what I think is probably the right starting point to date civilization. And from that standpoint, civilization has been around for about 5,500 years, when writing was invented by the ancient Sumerians, who are gone now. But the ancient Sumerians, in terms of getting a lot of firsts, those ancient Sumerians really have a long list of firsts. It's pretty wild. In fact, Durant goes through the list. It's like, you want to see firsts? We'll show you firsts. The Sumerians were just ass kickers. And then the Egyptians, who were right next door, relatively speaking, weren't that far, developed an entirely different form of writing, the hieroglyphics. Cuneiform and hieroglyphics is totally different. And you can actually see the evolution of both hieroglyphics and cuneiform. Like the cuneiform starts off being very simple, and then it gets more complicated. And then towards the end, it's like, wow, okay, they really get very sophisticated with the cuneiform. So I think of civilization as being about 5,000 years old. And Earth is, if physics is correct, 4.5 billion years old. So civilization has been around for 1/1,000,000th of Earth's existence. Flash in the pan.
Yeah, these are the early days. And so we
Very early.
We make it very dramatic because there's been rises and falls of empires. And
so many rises and falls of empires. So many.
And there'll be many more.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, only a tiny fraction, probably less than 1% of what was ever written in history is available to us now. I mean, if they didn't literally chisel it in stone or put it in a clay tablet, we don't have it. Yeah. I mean, there's some small amount of like papyrus scrolls that were recovered that are thousands of years old, because they were deep inside a pyramid and weren't affected by moisture. But other than that, it's really got to be in a clay tablet or chiseled. So the vast majority of stuff was not chiseled, because it takes a while to chisel things. So that's why we've got tiny fraction of the information from history. But even that little information that we do have, and the archaeological record shows so many civilizations rising and falling. It's wild.
We tend to think that we're somehow different from those people. One of the other things that Durant highlights is that human nature seems to be the same. It just persists.
Yeah, I mean, the basics of human nature are more or less the same.
You know? So we get ourselves in trouble in the same kinds of ways, I think, even with the advanced technology.
Yeah, I mean, you do tend to see the same patterns, similar patterns, for civilizations where they go through a life cycle like an organism. Sort of just like a human is sort of a zygote, fetus, baby, toddler, teenager, eventually gets old and dies. The civilizations go through a life cycle. No civilization will last forever.
What do you think it takes for the American empire to not collapse in the near-term future, in the next 100 years, to continue flourishing?
Well, the single biggest thing that is often actually not mentioned in history books, but Durant does mention it, is the birth rate. So, perhaps to some, a counterintuitive thing happens when civilizations become are winning for too long. The birth rate declines. It can often decline quite rapidly. We're seeing that throughout the world today. Currently, South Korea is I think maybe the lowest fertility rate, but there are many others that are close to it. It's like 0.8, I think. If the birth rate doesn't decline further, South Korea will lose roughly 60% of its population. But every year that birth rate is dropping, and this is true through most of the world. I don't mean to single out South Korea. It's been happening throughout the world. So as soon as any given civilization reaches a level of prosperity, the birth rate drops. And now you can go and look at the same thing happening in ancient Rome. So Julius Caesar took note of this, I think, around 50-ish BC, and tried to pass, I don't know if he was successful, tried to pass a law to give an incentive for any Roman citizen that would have a third child. And I think Augustus was able to, well, he was, the dictator, so the Senate was just for show. I think he did pass a tax incentive for Roman citizens to have a third child, but those efforts were unsuccessful. Rome fell because the Romans stopped making Romans. That's actually the fundamental issue. And there were other things. There was like, they had like quite a series of malaria epidemics and plagues and whatnot. But they had those before.